all those who are present here for the very first session of the Tech Talk Season 3, Introduction to Azure Machine Learning Studio. This event series is a concept brought to you by the data and science student community, and this series has been created specifically to bridge the gap between academic and industry requirements. The objective of this event is to develop your technical knowledge and to raise awareness of the Azure Machine Learning Studio. We are glad that you have joined in, and we hope you gain a decent amount of valuable and understanding on this focus topic. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the speaker for today's session, Maleesha de Silva, a fourth-year undergraduate of SLIIT and a Microsoft Learn student ambassador. We are very grateful to have you here today with us to share your knowledge about Azure Machine Learning Studio. Maleesha, over to you.
Thanks, Abdul. Hi everyone, welcome to the session. I'm assuming you know about today's topic. It's Introduction to Machine Learning Studio, Azure Machine Learning Studio. So let me share my screen first of all. Okay. So as I mentioned, today's topic is Introduction to Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? So so before we get started, there are people with different levels of knowledge on machine learning. So I'll start off from the basics and then I'll build it up, right? So when we talk about machine learning, let's first look at what machine learning is, right? Okay, so what is an ML model? So a machine learning model is a file that has been trained to recognize certain types of patterns. So what you basically do is you give in a data set and you say, okay, this is the data set, find out patterns that can be used to predict future data, right? So you train a model over a set of data, providing it an algorithm that it can use to reason over and learn from those data. So what the machine learning model does is it takes the data set and it learns from the data set, identifies patterns. So in the future, when you give in a new data, it can predict based on the identified patterns. The machine learning model can predict what sort of an outcome you will get, right? So yes, so that is what a machine learning model is. So let's look at where these machine learning models are used, right? So so machine learning models are used in various industries. So as you can see here, in the finance and banking industry, for fraud detection, for healthcare to diagnose diseases, e-commerce industry, to generate recommender systems. So so it's like when you go to a shopping site, they recommend items to you based on what you looked for before that, right? So this is done using machine learning. And then in the entertainment media, same thing, content recommendation on YouTube and all these algorithms, you get suggested videos because of these machine learning algorithms that they have implemented. And again, in marketing, churn prediction. Churn prediction is say you have some telecommunication service and they do this, implement these churn prediction models to see which customers will leave the service, will leave and move on to another service, that is churn prediction. So as you can see, these ML models are used in a variety of industries, right? Now, moving on to what Azure Machine Learning Studio is. Azure Machine Learning Studio is a platform that allows you to implement machine learning solutions, right? So this platform can be used by individuals who have a good knowledge in machine learning and also who don't have a good knowledge on machine learning, but they want to use these machine learning models, right? So basically anyone can use this platform to implement machine learning models. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the steps of implementing a machine learning model. Okay, so as I said, some of you might know these things, some of you might not know these things. So I'll just go back to the basics and let's move on from there. Okay. Okay, so first of all, I told you, you deal with a data set. You take a data set, and then what you do is you give that. First thing is you have to look at the data set and you have to do some pre-processing steps, right? So pre-processing is basically you're going to prepare this data set to a suitable form to create a ML model, right? So so these pre-processing steps, there are so many different pre-processing steps, like handling missing values, feature selection. Feature selection is something like, so when you have a data set, you can have like several attributes in this data set, right? So you might not need all these attributes to implement the machine learning model. Some of these columns or the attributes in the data set might not actually be useful. So then you can take a look at the data set and you can decide, okay, this column is not needed. Let's take it out. So that is feature selection. Handling missing values is, so on an industrial level, when you have like large amounts of data, this data can have a lot of like errors, missing values, like errors. So what you have to do is to deal with these missing values, you have several different methods. One method is you can replace the missing values with the mean. The mean of the you can take the mean of that particular column and you can replace the missing values with those means. Another method is you can completely just ignore that row with the missing values, right? So there are so many different ways of handling the missing values. I'm not going to go into like detail, but just know that there are different methods to handle missing values. And then removing outliers. Outliers are data that like values that deviate from the other data, and like it deviates a lot. So then if you use that data to implement the machine learning model, it will totally change the outcome. So we have to remove those outliers as well. Then data normalization. Normalization is something like, so you have, say you have a column which has values from 0 to 10, and then another column has values from 0 to 10,000. So then that is like two different ranges. So then you have to scale it down. You can scale both those columns into values from 0 to 10, right? So that is data normalization. So this data pre-processing steps, I can't say these are the exact steps that you have to follow. It depends on your data set, right? You can look at your data set and then you can decide what kind of pre-processing steps that you have to implement, right? The better the pre-processing is, the better your model is going to be, right? Because if you have like a lot of errors in your data set, it's going to reflect in your model, right? So you have to carefully select the pre-processing steps. Once the pre-processing is done, you move on to splitting the data set, right? So splitting the data set, usually we go for a ratio of we have to split the data set into two, as training data and testing data, right? So training data is what we use to implement the model, right? To train the model. And then the testing data is what we use to evaluate the model, to see how well this model, how good this model is, how good the predictions of this model are, how accurate our model is, right? So you split the data into two parts. Usually we go with the training data set is usually we take around 70 to 80% for the training data set, right? So that means the testing data set would be around 20 to 30% of the total data, right? Okay, so that is basically how you split the data. And then you train the model using the training data set, test, and then you test that model using your testing data. Okay, so that is the basic, those are the basic steps that you have to implement to create an ML model, okay? Okay, and now we'll move on to what this Azure Machine Learning Studio is. So as you can see here, okay, before that, if there are fourth years here, you've probably seen this interface. I think we had some practicals as well. This interface we have seen, but this interface, this is the Azure Machine Learning Studio Classic version, right? This version will be expiring on the 31st of this month, 31st of August. This will be expiring. They will be moving on to the new version of Machine Learning Studio, which is why I thought I'd select this topic, because I can give you an introduction into the new version and how things work in that. right? So this version will no longer be there. I'll show you what the new version is, right? Okay, now I think we can move on to the demo. Okay, so before going to the demo, I'll just give you a brief introduction on what we're going to do. Okay, so first thing we need to do is in our Azure environment, we need to create a resource group. So what exactly is a resource group? I'll explain to you what exactly a resource group is. So it's like we are going to implement a machine learning model, right? So now, when we're implementing this machine learning model, we'll be using different resources. So for an example, I'll explain what these things are. We'll be using AKS clusters, compute clusters, different machine learning workspaces, like that. So to hold all those resources, we need a container. So the resource group is the container that will hold all the resources that we'll be dealing with, right? So once we create the resource group, I'll come back. Okay, so let's go to Azure and let's create. Okay, so once you log into Azure, you can see go to create a resource group, and then you can click on this create button, and then you can give any name to your resource group, right? So I'll just give a name, and then you can select a region. Okay. Now we have created a resource group. That means we have created the outermost layer. We have created a container that is going to hold all our resources, right? Okay, the next thing is we need to create, let me go back. Okay, so next thing is we need to create a machine learning workspace, right? So all the machine learning, so within the resource group, we are going to create the machine learning workspace. So our solution in today's session is to create a machine learning model, right? So to create a machine learning model, we need to have a machine learning workspace. So then you go to this Azure Machine Learning Service and you can create a workspace, right? So when you're creating the workspace, now I created the resource group. So you need to select that specific resource group and you can create your workspace. Okay. And then, so they're going to ask you for a storage account, these things. You can just, if you already have these things, you can select, but I'm going to create new ones, okay? Okay, so now when I go to my resource group that I created, it's still deploying. Okay. Before that, so until that deploys, I'll go to a resource group that I previously created. Okay. So in this resource group, I have created a workspace like I did before. I've created a workspace. Additional to the workspace, you can see there are some additional things that are included, right? So we have a storage account. So I'm not going to go into detail of what all of this is. What we need here is a storage account, right? Storage account is where we're going to store our data set, right? So we need a data set to implement the model. So to store the data set, we're going to use a storage account, right? And then you have this key vault. Key vault will basically be used to store all our the keys that we use. So I'll show you in the future, like when we implement the model, we have these keys and tokens, right? So to store all of that, we need the key vault. And then application insights is used to gain insights on our solution. Okay, so we don't need those things. We just need storage account. Okay. Now, the resource group that I created and the machine learning workspace has been created. Okay. So let me go into that workspace. And now you can see there's a button to launch the studio, right? So I'm going to click on that. Okay, let me go back to the slide until then. Now we created the resource group, we created the workspace. Now we can start implementing our model, okay? Okay, so this is the new interface. I showed you the previous interface for Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? So that is the old interface. This is the new interface, right? So I'll just go through what we have here. So we have three main methods that we can implement machine learning in the new version of Machine Learning Studio. You can either use notebooks. So I'm sure all of you have worked with Colab Jupyter notebooks. So similar to that, we can work with notebooks. And then automated ML is for people who don't really know what are the steps that you need to implement a ML model, right? So if you're using this automated ML solution, all you have to do is give the data set and say give what you want to predict. Say I want to predict this specific value, and then they will look at the data set and they will just create the machine learning model for you. Right. So the thing about this is you have very low amount of control about what is the algorithm that they'll be using. So that is a disadvantage. But if you don't have knowledge, this is a perfect solution because you don't have to do anything. You just have to do the data set and say what you want to predict. And then this ML designer is actually what we're going to use today. So this designer is something where it's a low code or no code solution. So either you can go with a completely no code method, or you can use some amount of code. So this is what we'll be using today, right? So once you go into this designer, you can see that they are going to give you that's an option to create a new pipeline, right? I'm going to click on that. Okay. Okay. Now we are within our resource group, and within the resource group, we are within our workspace, right? Now you can see they have given you an empty canvas. So this is canvas. So within this canvas, we can create whatever the ML model we want, right? There is going to be no code involved. You just have to do is drag and drop different components. Okay. So the first step, if you remember the presentation, the first step in implementing a model is you have to take your data set, right? So let's add our data set. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to implement a diabetes prediction model. So the data set will contain data of different patients who had diabetes or didn't have diabetes. So, okay, so let me first show you the data set. Okay, this is our data set. Okay, so what we're going to predict is if the patient will get diabetes or they won't get diabetes. Is the patient a diabetes? Are they going to get? Is there a possibility of them getting diabetes, or is there no possibility of getting diabetes? Right. Okay. So let me give a name for our data set, and then you can give a description. It's optional. I'm going to click on next. Now you can see they have asked you to select a source for your data set, right? So when you're creating the data set here, they have given you 4 options, right? So the first option is if you have some data stored in Azure storage, you can use that, right? If you have some data stored in Azure File Share or Azure Data Lake, you can straight away use that. And then you can use a local file, right? From your local files, you can if you have a data set saved locally, you can use that. And then if you have a Azure SQL database or a Postgres database, you can use that database to create a data set. Okay, and the fourth option is from web files. Okay, so this is the option that I'll be using today, this web files option. So I think the reason that I'm going with this is because it's something new for us. We haven't used this web file method before. So I'll be using this web file, right? And click on next, and they ask for the URL. Okay, so what a web file is basically is, so let me go and just Google diabetes CSV dataset. Okay, so then we have the data set here. And then I need it in raw form in the CSV format. Okay, so this is what we get, right? So yeah. Then what you do is just copy this link and drop it in here. Okay, that's all you have to do. You don't have to download the data set. You don't have to store it in your machine. It's just, you can take it straight off the internet, right? Okay. Okay, then you can select this delimiter. So if you go back to our data set, you can see the delimiter is this comma, right? The symbol that separates two columns. Okay, so it's comma. So I'm not going to change any of this. And you can have a look at the data set, and you can, if you want to change the data types of any data, you can do that. And then finally, you can create the data set. Okay, now we have created our data set, right? So we put our data set in here. Now we are going to create a pipeline. So if you remember the slide that I explained before, first we have your data. The next step is preprocessing, right? So I'm not going to go into a lot of preprocessing. The preprocessing that I'm going to use is feature selection or selecting the columns, right? So let me take that one. Select columns. So you can see here, there's no data, no coding involved, right? So if you have implemented a machine learning solution in Jupyter or Colab, you have to write the code to select the columns for preprocessing everything. But here, there's no code involved, right? Then you can connect these two, and then you can select what are the columns you want. Okay. So I'll just select everything. And then if I feel like this tricep thickness is not so like related or not needed for this ML model, I can just ignore it. So then, even though the full data set has this tricep column, tricep thickness column, that we won't be using that to implement our model, right? We won't be considering that data. Okay. Then we can save it. Now we've done the preprocessing. The next step is splitting the data, right? Splitting the data. So that here. And I told you we usually use 70 to 80% of the data as training data, right? So I'm going to put 0.7 here. Okay, save it. And then now if you look at our data set, okay, now if you look at our data set, you can see that this data set has two values. The column that we want to predict is this diabetic column, right? So it has two values. Either they have diabetes or they don't have diabetes, right? So there are two values, 0 or 1. It won't be anything other than that. So then there are two classes in the output, right? So what we're going to what I'm going to use as the algorithm is two-class logistic regression. Okay, so what we basically do is I'm going to say this is the type of algorithm that I want. So you can have different algorithms, decision trees, whatever you want, you can select from here. Okay, and then train the model. Okay, so when we're training a model, you need to give the data set, right? So now I split the data into two parts, right? 70% for training data and 30% for testing data. So this, now you can see from this one data set, it's split into two parts, right? Data set 1 and data set 2. Okay, so this data set 1 will be a 70% of the data. So I'm going to put that in here. And then what is the algorithm that, or what is the machine learning model that we are going to use is two-class logistic regression, put that in here. Okay. And then you can we have to give what is the label column. The label is in machine learning, in a machine learning model, the label is basically what you want to predict, right? So in this case, it's this diabetic column, right? So that is what I want to predict, right? So I'm going to take this diabetic column, select it here, save it. And then you can see the column, the label that we want to predict is diabetic, the diabetic column, and everything else I'm going to leave it as it is. Okay, then once we train the model, we're going to see how good our model is, right? Score the model, calculate the accuracy, right? How accurate this is. So I told you, if I go back to this slide, we use the training set to train the ML model and the testing set to evaluate or see how good our model is, right? So now in here, I split the dataset into two. We have your training data and we have your testing data. And this is the testing data. So that is what we use to evaluate the model, right? So I'm going to take this here, and then the model that I want to evaluate is this one. Okay. Then finally, I want to see the results, evaluate the model. Okay. Now you can see this is basically my ML model. It's super simple, no code involved. It's very easy. Something that I want to add is now here in the pre-processing, I use this node to select the columns. But if you think none of these nodes here, these components here, can do the pre-processing in the way that you want, you can write the code for that, right? So that is why it's called a low code, not a lot of code, small amount of code, right? So either you can go with a no code solution, which is this, and if you think you need to implement some amount of code, you can go with this script, right? So what you have to do is, if you want to do that, you can just keep this here, and then you can give your code. Okay, so you can implement your pre-processing in here. Okay, but I'm not going to do that today. Okay, so this is basically my ML model. Okay, now I'm going to submit this model. Okay, once you're done with the model, you can submit this model. Okay, so I'm going to create a new experiment. Okay, I'm going to create a new one. Okay, before we implement our machine learning model, so let me go back to the slide. Okay, now we created a pipeline, right? That is done. Now to deploy this pipeline to train the model, we need some kind of computation, right? Some kind of processing. So for that, we're going to use a compute cluster, right? It's kind of like we're going to deploy the model into that cluster. Okay, so we're going to go to compute. And then you can see there are four options here, right? This compute instance is what you usually use if we're going to work with these notebooks, right? If you're going to work with notebooks, this is the kind of compute instance that we're going to use. But here I went with this designer method. So I'm going to use this compute clusters and I'm going to create a new compute cluster. Okay. Okay, so now, okay, if you remember when I was creating my resource group, the region was East US, right? So I have to make sure that the region I'm using for this one is also East US, right? The same region, okay? And then I'm going to leave these things as it is. You can select a category like the computational power, those things you can select, and this is the cost. So I'm going to leave these things. And I'm going to give compute. and then create it. Okay. Creating. Let me go back to my pipeline. Okay, so I'm going to rename this pipeline as well. Okay, so now we were going to submit this, right? Create a new experiment. Compute cluster. So this you can see here there are the 4 options, compute options. So what we went with was with compute cluster, and then you can see what we created right now. Okay, and then you can say, okay, I want to deploy my model on this cluster. Okay, submit it. You can go to validate and see if there is any error. Okay, so it looks like there are no errors. Now I have submitted my model. Okay, now it's going to train the model. Now if I go to jobs, right, you can see in here there is a job running. Okay, so now you can see this is running. So all of these steps have to run. So this takes a little bit of time. So what I'm going to do is I have created a pipeline before. So let me go into that. Until this runs, I'll just show you the steps using the previously created model. Okay, now you can see this is the same data set, same model that has been implemented, and there's a job. And now you can see there are 4 jobs, right? So in this one, it says it's still running. Okay, so here it's being completed. This is one that I created yesterday. So it's done, it's completed. So now you can see there are, just forget about these 2, right? Just focus on these 2. This is the job. Okay, so if I go to this job, you can see that all these steps have been executed. There are no errors, no issues, everything is fine, right? Now, if I go here and click on this evaluate model and go to evaluation results, sorry, preview of the data, evaluation results, you can see everything that we need. So if you have implemented a machine learning model, we're usually asked to show these curves, these confusion matrix, everything, right? So you can get all of that here, right? This ROC curves, precision recall curves, lift curves, and then this is the confusion matrix. So you know this true positive, false positive, all of that values, and then the accuracy, right? So the accuracy of this model is 0.78, right? So now if I feel like this accuracy is not enough, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit it again. I can go back to here and I can resubmit, and then it will train the model again. So when you train it again and again, the accuracy, there's a possibility of the accuracy increasing. And then once I'm satisfied with the accuracy, I can stop training. Okay. So I'm not going to do it again because I think for now this is enough. This accuracy is enough. And now if I go here, if I go to trained model, code data set, you can see. Okay, so here, this is the data set, right? So in here, a preview of not all the data set, preview of the data set, right? Now here you can see this is the diabetic column in our data set, right? This is the column that has the predicted values. So you can see if I go here, the actual for this record, this first record, the actual value is 0, right? But the machine learning model is going to predict it as 1, right? But if I take this one, the actual value is 1. The ML model has predicted it as 1. That is fine, right? So obviously all of them are not going to be correct. That is why the accuracy is 0.78. You'll never get like 100% accuracy. So yeah, this is like the actual value and the predicted value, right? So you can look at all those results from here, okay? And then now we're done with training the model. So let me Go back to here. So this is still running. Okay, let's leave it like that and let's move on with this one. Okay, so now I have created the model. So if I go back to my slide, now we have created the pipeline. We have deployed it using a compute cluster, right? Now we have to like publish a pipeline to an endpoint. We have to get an endpoint to test the pipeline, test the machine learning model. We have a machine learning model now. We need to test it, right? So to test it, what I'm going to do is, now we have this train model node, right? Whatever the model you implement, these steps might change, but this part is going to be the same most of the time, right? So click on this node. And then go to outputs and logs, and then you need to download this Python, the script file, this code.python, this conda environment. We download this. So you need to download 3 files, right? Download these 3. We'll need them in the future, right? Okay, now we're going to publish this model to an endpoint, right? Okay, now, okay, now let me go to models, right? So, no. So this is our pipeline, right? So I'm going to register the model. Okay, so I'm going to train model. And then go to this. And then here you can see now this is the trained model we have. I'm going to register the model. Click on register model. You can give a name to the model. So description, save, right? Okay. Now we can see I have registered the model. Okay. Okay, so this is what I created now. This is what I created before. Okay, let me go with this one. Okay, now you can see we have registered a model. Now we have, okay, we have created the pipeline, trained the model, and now we have this is actually like, it can be considered as a file, right? We have a file, a model. Now we want to test this model. Okay, now if I want to test this model, I'm going to click on deploy, right? Deploy, you can deploy it in different ways, but today I'm going to deploy it as a web service, right? Click on web service, and then you can give a name. And okay, now they're asking for a compute type, right? So I told you, you need one specific cluster to train the model. And to deploy the, like to publish the model to an endpoint, we need a separate cluster, right? For that, we are going to use this AKS cluster, right? So let me go back to compute and create a new cluster, okay? Compute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Kubernetes cluster. And the Kubernetes clusters, AKS compute, and you can create a new cluster. Okay, you can select a region that you want, and you can select the location, and then you can select this what the kind of category you want. So I'm not going to create it because I've already created one. So yeah. So let me go back to my model. Okay, so this is the one that is still running. This is the one that we were at. Okay, so now I have already created a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so now let me go back to this model. Okay, and I'm going to deploy it as a web service and AKS compute, and you can select the compute type that we had. Okay, and then you can give a name and a description for the model. You can do all that. It's pretty simple. And then here, I downloaded 3 files, right? So the script file is this code.py. This one. Okay, this one, we put it in here. Okay. And the dependency file is this environmental file. Environment file, upload these two. Okay, then you can deploy it. You can give a name and you can deploy this model. Okay, so okay, I've already deployed the model. So let me go to, so once you deploy it, you will get an endpoint, right? Now we have an endpoint. Now we can test our model. Okay, so let me go in here. Okay, now you can see we can test the model. Okay, so I'll show you 2 ways that you can test it, right? So the first way to test it is you can, if you remember, I downloaded a file called samples, right? Okay. So here in the samples file, they have some sample data given, right? So we'll use the sample data and paste it here and click on test. I'll just use one record, okay? So this is our sample data that we want to test. Click on test and you can see they have given. So this here, this value here is the actual value, this diabetic value, right? This one here is the predicted value, okay? So in this case, the prediction is wrong. But if I take a different record, and click on test, you can see the actual value is 0. The predicted value is also 0. That is correct, right? Okay, so that is one way of testing it. Another, I think, a nicer way of testing it is this consumer, like using Postman, right? So if we go to Postman, like we can copy this link, right? And we can go to Postman. So if I'm assuming you all know what Postman is, so it's like you can use it to test. Like if you don't have a front end, you can use this Postman environment to test like the back end implementation of things, right? So you paste this here, paste the endpoint URL there, and then take some sample data. Then go to body, raw, then this. Okay, and now let me test it. Okay, it's a post request, right? Okay, we got the result. So as you can see, the actual value is 0. The predicted value is also 0. Okay, this is a confidence value. It's not really needed, right? Okay, so that is how you test your ML model, and basically we're done. That is how you deploy a model. There was no code involved, 0 coding involved, and you have a working ML model, right? So if I go to recap, we had a resource group, we had a workspace, and then within the workspace, we created the pipeline and then deployed it using a compute cluster, a model, and you deployed the model using an AKS cluster. Now, I have something for you guys. I have a small quiz, okay? Like, I'm sure you guys know like what Kahoot is. So it's something like that. Let's go and get started with that. because I feel like it might be boring, otherwise I'm talking. Okay, so let me share this quiz, right? I'll put this URL on the chat, or you can just go to you can just scan this QR code, or you can use this. You can go to the site mentimeter.com and use this code, or you can use the URL, or you can scan the QR code, right? Okay. I have a small prize. I'll be choosing one winner, and that's a small prize. So people are joining. I think the first 50 only can join. So yeah. This has a limit of 50 participants. Also, if you have any questions, just drop them on the chat, or you can unmute and ask. Okay. Okay. Let's start. The others can join along the way, right? Okay. So this quiz will be based on what I talked about today, right? It's just 4 questions, and we'll see who's going to win. Okay. Okay, so the first question is already done. Okay, we have 8 correct responses. Let's see. Okay, now that's going to be a problem. I don't know who this is, but it's fine. Okay, the faster you answer, the more score you're going to get. Okay. And then third question. This thing is going to win. I think it was let's see. Bill. Okay, I don't know who Bill is. Let's see how can we know. Can they just drop a message on the chat so that I know who it is? And I can give the price afterwards. So you can join, drop a message on the chat, okay? Just some message, an emoji or something. Okay, so we're done with the implementation. I have one more thing to talk about. Okay. Oh yeah, we have Bill. Okay, Bill. I'll talk to you after the session. Okay, I'll give you a price afterwards. Okay. Now I told you this Azure Machine Learning Studio, the new version is like it has some improvements. Let's see what these improvements are. This is the last part. So these are the new features of this new Azure Machine Learning features, new Azure Machine Learning interface, right? So the most important thing is that you have this notebook feature. So like even in our academics, we can't use these no-code solutions. These no-code solutions are good for industrial level in work, like when you're working in an office, you need this knowledge. But then for assignments and stuff, we can't use these no-code solutions. But notebooks, we need the notebooks to code. So this new version of Azure Machine Learning has this notebook feature as well, right? And also it's good for like training larger, like more complex models, and the securities. You have more enhanced role-based access securities. So those are the features. That is why this new Azure Machine Learning interface is good, right? Okay, so okay, so that's it. Hope you all learned something, and if you have any questions, you can drop it on the chat, or you can unmute the mic. Yeah, Abdul, over to you.
Thank you, Maleesha, for that informative session on the Azure Machine Learning Studio. I think everyone found it informative. As Maleesha said, let's open up the session for queries from the participants. If you have questions, please unmute yourself, or you can also direct your question to the chat. Looks like there are no questions. 5 seconds more. Yeah, looks like there are no questions. So I hope that everyone understood. I hope that everyone understood everything that Maleesha has talked about today. So thank you, Maleesha, for giving us this informative session and taking time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us with your knowledge. And ladies and gentlemen, before you leave, as you have witnessed, these Tech Talks are a productive learning and knowledge development series that is created by the data science student community. So let me take this opportunity to thank the DSSC for organizing this session and also many others going forward. Most importantly, I would like to thank all our participants for joining along with us. This session would not have been possible without your support. Please follow us on our social media handles on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and others. The links are also available in the chat, and show your support for the DSSC. Going ahead, there'll be physical sessions that are going to be held. So we hope to meet you all at those physical sessions as well. Our next session will be held on campus on Saturday, next Saturday. We are planning to continue this series of tech talks. So please stay connected with us to know further details about these upcoming sessions. We hope to see you in all those coming sessions in the future. So with that, we've come to the end of this session of the Tech Talk series. I hope that everyone found this informative as I did. And I hope I bid you farewell. Good night and stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah, there are a few questions. So yeah, how can we use it without pay? Yeah, you can use Azure. If you're third year, you have Azure, you have the subscription. So I think it's valid for 1 year. You can use that. You have the features free, you don't have to pay. The second question is, how does Azure Machine Learning is used in the semesters? If I'm not wrong, we had one practical for FDM module. We used Azure Machine Learning Studio, but then this was last year, so then this was the old version. So this year probably they'll use this new interface. We had we used this for practicals, and yeah, I'll upload the recording. I'll share the recording with you guys. Yeah, those are the questions, and thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to DSSC as well. Yeah, bye bye. See you.